You've been here before. A woman smiles at you in a way that feels different, softer than usual. She leans closer, asks how you've been, touches your arm lightly as if she cares more deeply than others ever do. Something in you relaxes. You think, finally, here is someone who understands me. You start to believe the story your heart wants to tell, that this is kindness, that this is a sign of real affection. And yet, just as quickly, her warmth cools. The text that once came with ease now comes slower, shorter. The tone shifts from generous to distant. You are left confused, replaying every detail in your mind, wondering whether you imagined her tenderness, or worse, whether she only used it to draw you in. It feels like a betrayal, but beneath it lies something more unsettling. The realization that what you thought was kindness may have been a kind of test, not of your worthiness as a man in the way you imagined, but of your ability to see through appearances. Machiavelli, the great Florentine who wrote with the sharpness of a knife, would tell you that what you call kindness in this moment is nothing more than a move in a game of power. He would warn you that to mistake it for genuine softness is to hand over your strength to another. For Machiavelli, every gesture, every word, every expression in the theater of human interaction must be read not for its sentiment, but for its utility. A woman's kindness, he would whisper to you across 5 centuries, is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a test. And the man who cannot see the test for what it is will always find himself enslaved to those who understand the game better than he does. This is the transformation he promises, to strip away the illusions that have clouded your sight, to show you how to read her actions not as they appear, but as they function. Only then can you move from the man who is ruled by confusion to the man who rules by clarity. Only then can you become untouchable. Machiavelli's philosophy turns on a single piercing truth. Appearances are masks. Power is not in what is said, nor in what is shown, but in what is hidden beneath. He calls this the art of appearing, the mastery of seeming virtuous without being bound to virtue itself. For him, the world does not reward honesty or good intentions. It rewards perception. A prince does not need to be merciful. He only needs to appear merciful. He does not need to be faithful. He only needs to appear faithful. Because human beings, Machiavelli wrote, judge more by the eye than by the hand. They are captured by appearances, blind to substance. And if this is true of politics, it is even more true of desire. When a woman is kind, the untrained man believes he is glimpsing her essence. He believes she is revealing the truth of her heart. But Machiavelli would laugh at such naivety. He would say, she is appearing kind, and in that appearance lies her power. The question is not whether she is truly kind, but what her kindness does to you. Does it make you weak? Does it make you dependent? Does it disarm your suspicion? If so, then it was never kindness. It was strategy. This does not mean she sits plotting at her desk like a schemer in court. For Machiavelli, strategy is not necessarily conscious. It is instinctive, flowing from the deeper currents of human ambition. People instinctively use appearances to secure advantage because advantage is survival. And women, who have often been denied direct avenues to power, have honed the art of influence through the tools at their disposal. Gesture, tone, the promise of care, the withdrawal of it. Her kindness, then, is not a mirror of her soul. It is a mask that invites you to reveal yours. If you crumble under the weight of her apparent generosity, if you surrender your independence in gratitude for her attention, then you fail the test. You have shown that your power lies not within yourself, but in her hands. And once she knows this, her perception of you changes forever. Machiavelli himself lived this truth in ways that cut deep. He spent years in the labyrinth of Florentine politics, watching how men betrayed one another, how allies smiled while sharpening knives. He was tortured, imprisoned, cast aside when fortunes shifted. He learned the hard way that those who take words and gestures at face value are always the first to be destroyed. And though his writings appear cold, even cruel, beneath them you can feel the wound of a man who once believed too much in loyalty, too much in sincerity, only to find himself abandoned. His lesson was written in his scars. Never mistake appearances for truth. In the realm of desire, this lesson is brutal but liberating. When a woman seems kind, the question is not, what does she feel? But what does this appearance demand of me? If it demands that you soften, surrender, or lose your vigilance, then you are walking into a trap. If instead you can receive her apparent kindness without dependence, if you can enjoy it while remaining grounded in your own authority, then you pass the test. You prove that her mask does not dictate your reality. And this is the brutal truth Machiavelli presses into your hand. She is not testing your worthiness as a lover. She is testing your sovereignty as a man. To see this clearly is to step into the position of the prince, the one who cannot be ruled by illusion because he already understands the game. The brutal clarity of Machiavelli is that most men fail this test because they crave kindness too deeply. They mistake it for salvation. When a woman extends even a small gesture of warmth, they rush to give her their loyalty, their trust, even their identity. They become intoxicated with the idea that her tenderness confirms their worth. Yet Machiavelli would remind you that loyalty given without calculation is the greatest weakness a man can display. It is not that kindness has no value, but that in the political theater of life, value is never inherent. Value is determined by what something can do, how it shifts the balance of power. The man who clings to kindness as proof of love or safety forgets this law and pays the price in disillusionment. To understand Machiavelli is to replace the childlike hunger for comfort with the adult vision of strategy. You must begin to read gestures not as gifts, but as movements in a dance of power. This is not cynicism. It is realism. When she offers you kindness, you ask, what position does this put me in? When she withdraws it, you ask, what response does this attempt to pull from me? In this way, you are no longer a passive recipient of her moods, but an active interpreter of her plays. You see the field as it truly is. This is the essence of Machiavelli's promise, freedom through perception. Nowhere is this more important than in the psychology of women. For centuries, women have mastered influence in subtle forms because they were denied overt forms of authority. They became virtuosos in signaling, in masking, in wielding appearances with precision. What you feel as warmth is often a calibration of power. When she offers you sympathy, she measures whether you collapse into her arms, revealing dependence. When she praises you, she observes whether you become complacent, exposing your vanity. When she withdraws affection, she watches whether you chase, betraying your lack of sovereignty. Every act is a silent inquiry. Are you a man who governs himself, or are you governed by her performance? And this is where most men falter, because they want so desperately to believe in the purity of her kindness. But Machiavelli would demand that you cast off this illusion. He would say that women, like men, act not from ideals, but from necessity. Their kindness is not a window into their essence, but a weapon forged from survival. To expect otherwise is to live in fantasy, and in fantasy you are always defeated. The lesson becomes sharper when you look at Machiavelli's own life. He knew the sweetness of appearances and the sting of betrayal with an intimacy that marked his soul. Once a trusted diplomat of Florence, he was accused of conspiracy when political winds shifted. He was imprisoned, tortured on the rack, discarded by the very state he had served. He had believed that loyalty and skill would secure his place, but he was mistaken. He had trusted appearances. In his exile, he wrote The Prince, not as a celebration of cruelty, but as a manual carved from his wounds, a guide for those who did not wish to suffer as he did. He wrote that a ruler must not be bound by morality when survival is at stake, that he must master appearances without being enslaved to them. In those pages, you can hear the echo of a man who once trusted too much, who once thought sincerity would protect him, and who was destroyed because of it. His warning to you is the same. Do not let your hunger for kindness blind you to its function. For a woman's kindness, like a courtier's smile, is never without purpose. The choice before you is stark. You can continue to live as the man who begs for warmth, who reads every gesture as a confirmation or rejection of his worth, and in doing so, remain at the mercy of appearances. Or you can become the man who sees through the mask, who accepts kindness without dependence, who reads every gesture as a move in the eternal game of power. To choose the latter is to embrace Machiavelli's brutal gift, the ability to stand sovereign in a world of illusions. This sovereignty does not make you cold. It makes you unshakable. For when you see her kindness for what it is, a test, not a promise, you are no longer confused by its withdrawal. You no longer chase when it disappears. You no longer build your identity on the shifting sands of her approval. Instead, you become the man who governs himself, the prince of his own realm. And this is Machiavelli's final warning, the oracle-ace revelation whispered across the centuries. A woman's kindness is never the truth, but a mask. If you take the mask for the face, you will be ruled. If you see the mask for what it is, you will rule yourself. The choice is yours. To see the mask is to reclaim your vision, but to act on that vision requires strength. Machiavelli never promised comfort. His truths are jagged because they demand that you give up illusions that feel good. It feels good to believe that her kindness is pure. It feels good to imagine that her affection is a stable foundation upon which to build your confidence. But Machiavelli would tell you that the world is not built on purity, and your confidence cannot be built on shifting appearances. He would insist that you become a man who finds his strength not in her gestures, but in his own unshakable sovereignty. This is the transformation he offers, from dependency to dominion, from blindness to sight. Once you accept this, her behavior ceases to torment you. When she is kind, you no longer read it as proof that you are worthy. When she withdraws, you no longer read it as proof that you are failing. You recognize both as movements in a play that is not written for your comfort, but for the maintenance of balance and influence. You begin to ask the only question that matters. How do I hold my ground in the midst of this theater? This ground is not pride, not arrogance, but the discipline of seeing clearly. Machiavelli taught that appearances are the currency of power. Those who control appearances control the perception of reality. If you are easily swayed by kindness, then your reality is controlled by whoever offers it. But if you master the art of reading without surrendering, then no gesture, however sweet, can enslave you. You remain free. Women, Machiavelli might say, are often more skilled in this theater than men, because they have practiced it longer. Denied direct force, they became masters of subtlety. But the same rule applies. If you are ruled by appearances, you are weak. If you see through them, you are strong. To live this truth does not mean distrusting every woman or treating her as an enemy. That would miss the point. Machiavelli did not say that a prince should be loveless. He said that he must never be defenseless. Love can exist, but only when it does not blind you. Affection can be enjoyed, but only when it does not enslave you. Kindness can be welcomed, but only when you do not build your identity on it. The moment you do, you are lost. Machiavelli's own wound reminds us why this lesson matters. When Florence cast him aside, he was stripped of everything: position, influence, reputation. He had believed that his loyalty and service would protect him, but they did not. He had mistaken the appearance of safety for its reality. And in that fall, he learned the truth he passes to you. Never confuse what seems with what is. Never hand your sovereignty to appearances, no matter how convincing they feel. If the cruelty of political betrayal could break him, how much more easily can the smile of a woman break a man who has not learned this lesson? The test of her kindness is therefore not about her at all. It is about you. Will you be the man who sees, or the man who is blinded? Will you be the man who governs himself, or the man governed by illusions? This is the decisive choice. To accept Machiavelli's teaching is to enter a world stripped of comforting lies, but filled with dangerous clarity. It is not easy, but it is liberating. For once you no longer depend on her kindness to confirm your worth, you become untouchable. Her smile can warm you, her affection can move you, but they cannot enslave you. Her withdrawal can disappoint you, but it cannot destroy you. You have passed the test because you no longer mistake the mask for the truth. And this is the final revelation. Every act of kindness, every moment of tenderness is not proof of love, but a mirror held up to your sovereignty. If you remain whole in the face of it, then you have become what Machiavelli wished every man to be, a ruler not of others, but of himself.